Let's do that again. Aleksandar Svetski.
Try this again. All right, thanks, Nick. Let me just make sure this clicker works. Perfect. Hello, guys. Some of you may have seen me speak in the past. Jesus, that's bright. I'm going to probably stand here. Some of you may have seen me speak in the past, some of you may not have. So I'm going to try and make this as entertaining as possible, and I'll try and keep it to under half an hour, which is usually how long I talk for. So, why we didn't do an ICO? I'm going to take you guys through, obviously that is the first point, but in the process of exploring that, I'm going to look into some basic economic primitives. I'm going to look into how money and tokens behave and how equity behaves and how different it is. I'm going to talk about why most tokens and ICOs are a really, really bad investment. I'm going to talk about why tokens and business don't actually mix well, and where I believe most of the value is actually going to accrue in this space. Bit of background on me, as Nick said, founder of Amber Labs. I can tell you more about that afterwards, I'm not here to shill it. I've been involved in financial markets since 2006. I traded through the GFC, which was a lot of fun. Been involved in tech for a few years now. I went to Singularity University in 2011, if anyone's ever heard of that. You should go. First bought Bitcoin in 2012, but I moved out of the space for other things in 2013, and I've come back to it, I believe, in a big way since 2016. So, the question, why didn't we do an ICO? There's three main reasons, and these are sort of overarching reasons, and I'm going to dive into each of them. But effectively, there's a problem with the economic primitives of doing a token versus raising money as an equity, or as an equity sale. I have an issue with the integrity and the alignment of values across the different stakeholders when it comes time to raising capital. And then the mission and the time frame for our business particularly, we didn't feel like that was the right thing to do. So if we, oh Jesus, that's not right. There we go. Fundamental economic primitives. Let's start here. First of all, man, who did that to my slide? Tokens behave like money, and money does not behave like equity. And this might sound like a small distinction, but it's a really important distinction as we'll explore here. Has anyone read this book? Anyone? Yep. If you haven't read this book, it has nothing to do with Bitcoin, but it'll teach you more about Bitcoin, digital currencies, and money, and all that sort of stuff than just about any other book you'll read. Now, I don't have the time to go through and explore, go really deep on why money exists, what it's all about, and how it's evolved over time. But I'm going to give you guys the crash course. There's a thing called shared fiction. So one of the core themes of this book, it talks about why we as a species, as Homo sapiens, which is a subset of humans, why we were able to go from the middle of the food chain as just like a hairy ape to the top of the food chain and dominate the world. And the core premise behind that is this concept of shared fictions, is our ability as a species to communicate about abstract concepts that don't exist. And this is a really important fact. So the best way to think about shared fictions is monkeys, for example, can lie. Monkeys can say, hey, there's an eagle in the sky there, the other monkey runs off, and the monkey steals his banana. Or a monkey can warn of danger that's not in the immediate vicinity. They can say there's a lion down there by the creek. But only our species, only we here, can say something as ridiculous as lions are the spirit ancestor of our people. I don't know what the hell that means, but that is the basic premise behind our ability to create complex communication and then build complex societal constructs on top of that. Now, we've had different kind of shared fictions throughout history, and these have allowed us to basically evolve as a species beyond our biological limits. So gods, castes, races, nations, corporations, religions, all of these are figments of our imagination. We've made up every single one of them. And the most persistent shared fiction throughout history has been money. Now, most people don't know what money is, and I'm not going to deep dive into it, so I'm going to touch on it. Now, money as a shared fiction has evolved over time, and this is sort of what the progression looked like, really roughly, in terms of ancient money. Then we had modern money and how that evolved, and it introduced third-party trust in order to bring more of those attributes of money. Now, I should have gone into a couple of things. This is strange, my slides changed. In any case, money is the earliest recorded language, and it's the ultimate shared fiction. It's the only one that's persisted throughout history. And it's the ultimate social contract and social construct. Now, good money inherently has no value, and this is an important concept to understand. The paper in your wallet, the numbers on your screen inside NetBank or whatever you're using, has no inherent value, but it's a good representation of value. And I wish I had my slide here which actually talked about exactly what money is and all of the attributes of it. But the other thing, aside from money having no inherent value, one thing to understand is that money is also a convergent network. Now, what that means is, in a specific jurisdiction or a specific area, you can generally only have one form of money because of the way money functions as a consensus model. Is you can't have 12 US dollars inside the USA. You can't have 12 Australian dollars inside Australia. It converges to unity as a network. And that's a really important concept to understand when we start to explore how tokens behave. So, equity versus tokens and ICOs. And this is sort of my postulation here, is that the value of tokens have very, very little to do with the underlying metrics of the business, whether it's revenue adoption or user metrics. And this is basically why. Money and tokens have no inherent value. They operate on the economic primitives of supply, demand, of velocity, of MV equals PQ, of inflation, deflation. They're a completely different subset, they're a completely different study. Whereas equity operates on the basis of P ratios, of EBITDAs, of revenue multiples, of annual recurring revenue, and all that sort of stuff. And what you've effectively got is something like money and tokens have no inherent value because they're not productive assets. It's why someone like Warren Buffett doesn't like to invest in things like gold or currencies, because they don't produce anything. Whereas equity does have inherent value. It implies ownership of a productive asset. And they're two different types of investment classes. And a lot of people, what's happened in the crypto space is we've conflated the two together. We've seen, all right, cool business idea here. Let's sell a token which has no underlying attribution to the business, and let's give it a value. And people misunderstand where the value of that token comes from. You could literally have the most ridiculous, dumbest business idea on the face of the planet, and you can constrain the supply and you can drive the token value up. You can have a great, brilliant business idea, and you can have, let's say what's happening today in the market. I don't know if anyone's looked at it, it's down 25-30%. You can have cool ideas that have released a token that has no relationship back to what the business is doing, and you'll see a drop in price, 25-30%, despite how good the product or the idea is. So with that in mind, when we were going through our exploration, first of all, I had an issue with this whole idea of trying to conflate money and tokens and just trying to slap a token model on top of the business before we went out to raise. So then I thought about, all right, integrity and the alignment of our values and the values of all the parties that are involved in this, the team members, the founders, the investors, the users, and all of that. And I thought, all right, let's have a look at our mission. Our mission as Amber is to make digital currencies easy for everyday people. And we want to do that by letting people download an app, link their account, get on with their lives, spare change goes into their wallet, and it's all done. Long term, we want to be an access point and enabler, because there's all of this capital here that's sitting here that's going to flow into this new asset class. And of this new asset class, the things that are going to survive are things that behave more like money, and that's going to generally converge. And then things where we're going to start to tokenize more traditional type of securities and open them up. Now, that's sort of our mission. Now, the other mission that we have is to capture value in that process in the marketplace and then deliver a ROI for investors, for the team, for the founders, etc. So in thinking that, we said, all right, do we want to produce fundamental value, or do we want to produce speculative value here? Now, if you're like me, you may agree that the long-term value in this industry is yet to come. We're still at very, very early speculative stage. Now, long-term value capture requires time and it requires trust, both from the users and from the business side. A volatile, highly manipulated token price that's based on which whales got what token and where is contrary to the above two things, this concept of a long-term view on things. And so based on that, we said no. Then the next part, we thought, all right, do we as a business, do we want to build a product, or do we want to screw around trying to build an economy or manage an economy? Startups are hard enough as it is. People run around these days and think, you start a startup today, tomorrow you buy a BMW, and the third day, you're retired. It's not how things work. Businesses are hard to build. And you as an investor need to ask, are the founders focused on building a business or a product, or are they focused on trying to manage this token that's being manipulated on the markets and trying to constrain supply or burn tokens or this or that, or try and not get delisted from an exchange? So we said, no, we don't want to deal with that crap. We want to build a proper business. The next thing we asked ourselves is, do we want to deal with regulatory issues? Again, startups are hard. They're hard enough as it is. Are the founders focused on building an actual business or a product? Or are they scared, wondering if the SEC or ASIC or someone's going to come down on them for selling unregulated securities, which they've been doing up until now. Then we looked at our business and we said, all right, do we actually need a token or a blockchain? You know, everyone's running around trying to sprinkle blockchain and sprinkle Uber for this and token for that all over everything to try and, you know, change the world and solve hunger and world peace and all of this rubbish. We said, do we need that? And we said, no, we don't need that. We would just be basically ripping off people and telling them a lie just to raise some capital and, worst of all, non-dilutive capital. And here's a newsflash for everyone. 99.999% of businesses do not need a token, nor do they need a blockchain in order to function. And anybody who says that prior to them having anything built is just trying to raise non-dilutive capital. So as an investor, you should probably run in the opposite direction. Then we looked at our investors and we said, all right, we want to align with them. What are their values about? Now, in the good old days, probably since the beginning of time, startups would raise capital via the sale of equity. The company would share value capture with the investors and upside, and the investors would share some risk with the company. In today's Wild Wild West, you've got a situation where startups raise capital via the sale of some token, which is detached from the company as a whole. The company shares no value capture with the investors, and the investors carry all the risk of the investment and hope that it's going to continue going up based on the greater fool theory. And more importantly, the tokens behave like money, like I said, detached from the underlying operational entity. They've got nothing to do with each other. So, based on all that, we concluded that, all right, doing a token sale is just ridiculous. Trying to make up some ICO tokens so that we can flog for the purpose of raising money is ridiculous. We don't want to be remembered as that company that went and did that. So now that I've bashed on that, I'm going to talk about a little bit more about what we did and where I believe the value capture is going to occur in this space. This is the analogy I give to a lot of people when I get up on stage and talk. I say, 20 years ago, AOL said we need a better internet. Google, Netscape, and Hotmail said, no, we need to make the internet useful. So they built gateways, enablers, and tools to make the internet useful so that people could actually use the bloody thing. Today, you've got everyone running around trying to create a new Bitcoin. That's not going to work. What we need to do is make it useful, and the companies who are going to accrue value in this space are these guys, the Zappos of the world, the Krakens, the Ledgers, the Coinbases of the world, and I've put ourselves up there as Amber, is companies that are going to be enablers, on-ramps, utilities, access points so that people can use this stuff that's been created, not trying to reinvent the wheel again. Because that step change, that 0 to 1 innovation, if anyone's ever read some stuff from Peter Thiel, if you haven't, highly recommend it. That 0 to 1 innovation came with Bitcoin, and trying to take the recipe of what made that functional, which is this concept of Internet of Money, and apply it to things like businesses, which operate on different economic primitives and mental models, is just going to become a mess, which at the moment it is. And we haven't seen nothing yet in terms of the life cycle and the hype cycle. So some key takeaways. This was my really sophisticated flowchart when we were deciding what to do. Number one, do I need a blockchain? We decided no. And this goes for a lot of businesses out there. Then we went on to the next major question is, do I need a token? No. And that was our really sophisticated way of figuring this out. So they're the two big key takeaways. I've got a couple other key takeaways which I'll talk about. There is times when doing an ICO, or unregulated token generation event, or whatever the hell they're trying to call it these days, is good. It's if you want to participate in something that involves some short-term hype and pumps, go for it. If you're a trader, if you want to make some quick money and you want to make some 10x or whatever, go for it. It's good for short-term liquidity, but sort of as Simon said earlier, for those of you who are in the room, and I clap for him, was liquidity is a double-edged sword. You don't put liquidity in places where it's not needed. So, for example, people run around saying, oh yeah, mom and pop bakeries are going to list their equity. They're going to tokenize the equity in their businesses and list it on some exchange. They don't have time to eat, let alone bake enough bakeries to deal with customers. They're not going to sit there and do all the regulatory crap and reporting that's required in order to talk to investors, in order to make sure that the equity in their business is properly valued. And if they don't have time to do that, it won't be properly valued. So liquidity is not that magic, sprinkle some liquidity everywhere and it's going to change everything. So if you're looking for some short-term liquidity and want to just enter and exit, go for it. That's when an ICO is good. Or if you're got some ridiculous long-shot idea where you're going to combine drones with AI and machine learning and making money overnight and all this sort of stuff, that's a good time to do an ICO, because if the stupider the idea, the more chances, and the more money you raise, the more chances someone's going to throw a bunch of money at you and wonder what the hell happened with vaporware. The thing is, none of this stuff aligned with our values as a business. We're taking a long-term view. We believe that this space and the asset class in general is going to have capital flowing into it, and we want to be that gateway for that. So we said, all right, we don't want to do an ICO. Some more things to take away. There's 3 types of investments. There's a good investment, where the founders and the investors are aligned, and they both make money. There's a bad investment, where the investors lost some money, but guess what? So did the founders. They lost time, money, and energy. And there's a thing called a scam, which is the founders or the creators of it took a bunch of money, they took no downside risk, they get all the upside risks, and the investors, on the other hand, are left holding the bag, and they've got purely speculative Ponzi-style upside. And another name for that is ICO. So we didn't want to be that either. So, coming to the end of this, I implore you, if you are investing or you're looking to do stuff in this space, you want to think about what you're buying. Now, I think the next generation of tokens that are going to come out are going to be a little bit different. They're going to have something to do with the underlying operational entity. They're going to have something to do with equity. But guess what? That is basically digitizing or bringing forward the things that have worked for the last 10,000 years commercially, which is ownership of the underlying asset. Now we're just going to bring it into the future. So if anything, if we've learned anything over the last 18 months is that just, I'm going to go on a slight tangent here, but one of the hypocrisies that drives me nuts is I was around 2008 and I saw all the stupidity with the CDOs and the CDSs and all that sort of stuff. And we ran around saying, oh look, the bankers are bad because they took this piece of equity here and they layered all of this debt and crap on top of it and they sold it to people. And then we, in the blockchain world, whatever it is, we said, all right, they're a bunch of assholes, so we're going to go and create a bunch of tokens that have no value and no relationship back to any underlying asset, and we're going to just sell a bunch of fluff to people, but we're better. So I implore you, think about what you're buying, think about whether you're going to buy vaporware, think about whether you're going to buy business. Thank you very much.